All right, let's jump right in. We're going to tackle a really foundational question about authority in Islam. You see, there's a perspective that argues the Quran isn't just one source of guidance among many, but that it's the only source of guidance, period.
Okay, so you've almost certainly heard this phrase, right? Obey Allah and obey the messenger. I mean, it's pretty much central to Islam. But what if? What if it's not actually two separate instructions? What if it's really just one single command? Let's dig into that idea and see what it really means.
All right, so here's the central idea. The argument is that it's not obey God's book over here and obey the messenger's separate teachings over there. Nope. This perspective sees it as one totally integrated command.
And here's the verse that really drives this point home. The Quran itself says, "He who obeys the messenger has obeyed Allah." See, it's not a suggestion, it's a direct link. The two are completely inseparable. Obeying one is obeying the other. There's no daylight between them.
So what does that really mean? Well, the argument is that the messenger's authority didn't come from his own opinions or personal rulings. It came entirely from the message he was given to deliver. So according to this view, he wasn't creating new laws or legislating on his own. His whole mission, his entire job, was to deliver that one single divine message and, of course, to live by it.
Okay, so that leads to a pretty big question then, doesn't it? What exactly was the messenger's job? Let's see what the Quran itself has to say about his duty.
And boom, there it is. The messenger's duty is only to deliver the message. I mean, you can't really get clearer than that, can you? The source we're looking at points to this verse as the absolute mission statement. His job was singular, it was focused, convey the revelation. He was the ultimate deliverer, not an independent lawmaker.
So this really boils down to two competing ideas, two totally different viewpoints. On one hand, you've got what this source calls the Quranic view. The messenger is the one who delivers the scripture and is its living, walking example. But on the other hand, you have an external view, that the messenger is also an independent source of law through other collections like the Hadith and Sunnah.
Okay, and this is a really, really important distinction that the source makes, so listen closely. When the Quran itself uses the word Sunnah, the argument is that it's talking about the Sunnah of Allah. That means God's established way, his unchanging system. It's not referring to a separate collection of prophetic traditions that were written down much, much later.
All right, I know this has all been a bit abstract so far, so let's bring it down to earth. How would this actually play out in a real-life situation? Let's walk through a practical example.
Okay, so here's the scenario. We've got two guys, Zayd and Amr. Zayd lends Amr some money. Simple enough, right? But here's the catch. There's no written contract, no witnesses, nothing, just a handshake deal. I mean, that's a pretty common situation, even today.
And you can probably guess what happens next. Amr just refuses to pay it back. He denies the whole thing. And Zayd, well, he's got no proof. He's completely stuck. So what does he do? He goes to the messenger for a judgment.
So here's the big question. How would the messenger handle this? Is he going to invent a new law right there on the spot? Is he going to offer his personal wisdom? How is this problem going to get solved?
Well, according to the perspective we're exploring, the answer is he wouldn't do any of that. His role wasn't to invent a solution from scratch. It was to point back to the solution that already existed. He would act like a guide, pointing Zayd to the exact instructions that were already laid out in the Quran.
And here it is, right in the Quran. The instruction is incredibly clear. When you contract a debt, write it down and bring to witness two men. So the messenger wouldn't have to create a new rule. He'd just say, look, the answer's been here all along. His job wasn't to write the law, but simply to illuminate it. So that little story about the loan, it actually reveals a whole problem-solving system that's based entirely within the Quran. You can see how it works. You start with the direct text, you pull out the core principles like fairness and justice, and then you apply those principles to whatever problem you're facing. It's a complete framework that, according to this view, never needs to go outside of that one single source.
Okay, so this brings us to the final and most important point. What's the ultimate takeaway here? Where does the buck stop?
And the conclusion of this entire argument is this, that the Quran presents itself as the sole, complete, and totally sufficient source for guidance. The key point here is that it never, ever tells you to go look in another book to find the law. It claims to have everything you need, right there within its pages. And if you're looking for a mic drop moment, the source points to this verse. Now, it's important to know that the word hadith just means statement or narration. So the verse is asking a pretty powerful question. after this narration, the Quran, what other narration are you going to believe in? It's basically saying, after you've heard from God directly, what else is there?
Okay, to really grasp the weight of this argument, we have to talk about a concept called shirk. Now, shirk means associating partners with God, but it's not just about idols. Critically, it includes giving legislative authority, the right to make religious law, to anyone or anything other than God. And in Islam, this is considered the most serious mistake a person can make.
And here's where it all clicks into place. From this viewpoint, setting up a parallel source of religious law, essentially saying we obey the Quran and we also obey this other source, is seen as a form of shirk. Why? Because it implies that God's message wasn't complete, that it needed a human add-on. And that, according to this argument, fundamentally changes the entire belief in one single all-sufficient God.
So, that leaves us with one final big question to think about. The whole perspective we've just walked through is built on the idea that the Quran is a single, complete, and final message. Which leads you to ask, if a message really is presented as final and complete, then what possible role could there be for any other source of guidance that comes after it?